OWS Week has been chasing up actions all along the watchtower, beginning with Portland's candlelight vigil against austerity cuts that saw protesters occupy the office of Senator Ron Wydens against austerity cuts to social services and public programs. Stop ICE Holes rally then stormed the county sheriff's office as part of several actions by Portland's Culture of Resistance and International Human Rights. But Lansing, Michigan's rally at the Capitol really rocked the Casbah, with massive protests against far-right legislator called rights to work slip into law without debate or public input. Michigan workers and occupiers joined thousands of union members and allies to protest the latest assault on workers' rights. Then it was on to Chicago for the Fight for 15 rally and March Stand Up Chicago, when various Occupy Chicago groups and 20 community organizations and unions gathered at the Magnificent Mile to rally for a higher minimum wage for service industry and retail workers. Los Angeles has also developed a culture of resistance to the 1% rule, and to prove it, Stop LAPD spying action turned out to demand accountability from the police. And last but not least, the D.C. veterans held a panel discussion on employment, homelessness, mental health, and benefit delays affecting veterans, their families, and communities. An injury to one is an injury to all. December the 10th, 2012 was International Human Rights Day, and activists in Portland, Oregon were in the streets. A Stop ICE Holes rally organized by Portland Jobs with Justice Act and other Portland occupiers was held at the county sheriff's office. Now, activists aim to hold local law enforcement accountable for ICE immigration holes which target Hispanic Americans and other minorities suspected of being in the U.S. illegally. The holes often end in deportation and separation of families, and local activists feel the county should not collude with federal immigration enforcement. A candlelight vigil against austerity cuts was held in Portland later in the day, and Portland 99ers occupied the office of Senator Ron Wydens with a vigil against future austerity cuts to social services and public assistance programs. Overpass Light Brigade participated in the event, and citizens expressed their frustration with current government infrastructure, along with their hope that elected officials will devise a fiscal budget plan which alleviates the burden on everyday people. Right-to-work laws are laws that prohibit both the close and union shop in slightly less than half the states. Right-to-work supposedly secures the right of employees to decide for themselves whether or not to join or financially support a union. The historical impact of such laws has been to allow significant exploitation of labor, causing workers to have little or no options for negotiation of wages and benefits, as well as extremely limited recourse if laid off or wrongfully terminated.
In Madison, Wisconsin, we saw this for 6 weeks in February of 2011, and there were so many people that came from all around the country to support us, and this is a very important fight. We need to continue. We need to stand up for ourselves.
Now, why is this an important fight? Give me a chance to get this glove off first. I don't want to shake the camera. Kathy, why is this an important fight, and why should viewers care about it?
Viewers, this is an important fight basically because people's rights are slowly being eroded. People do not see what is going on. They don't. In right-to-work states, the average wages are much lower, education systems are lower, workplace safety standards are lower, just basically standard of living is lower. Right-to-work states, if you compare them to union states, are just at a deficit.
States with strong manufacturing, teaching, transportation, and other unions have generally had workers who enjoyed a better standard of living and had access to better education.
Occupy is a harbinger. Occupy was the first movement that demonstrated a renewed culture of resistance since the Cultural Revolution began in the 1960s in this country. We abandoned the American Cultural Revolution shortly thereafter. I would pin the year at 1980, in fact, when we traded in a resistance movement for a few dollars more, when we thought we could have infinite growth on a finite planet with no consequences. But it's back. The culture of resistance is back, and it's spearheaded by Occupy. And other groups have joined in now within the last year. So unions, for example. Permaculture is a major contributing force. It's been around for a while, but now is being largely and widely adopted by organizations that previously weren't interested. So we have unions, we have organizations, we have school teachers, we have policemen, we have first responders of all kinds, and many people in those groups are finally catching on that the only thing the only thing that we've ever had is resistance. And Occupy is leading the way and continues to lead the way. It's a very exciting time.
The state of Michigan, once a bastion of U.S. industry and a strong union haven, has declined as manufacturing jobs were outsourced, and many of its municipalities are now under harsh austerity management.
Basically, the governor is saying that it means one thing, and labor is saying it means something else. The governor is saying that it means that people should be able to choose whether or not they want to pay to be in a union, but that's not what the labor movement, myself included, believe it to be. Well, then we'll be like states like Mississippi or states that are currently right to work right now. Those states have lower wages. They have less insurance coverage, and that means less food on the table and less of a means to take care of their families.
The state's far-right legislature slipped right-to-work legislation into its recent lame duck session without debate, without public input, and Michigan workers countered the attack with massive demonstrations in the past week, beginning on Thursday, December the 6th, when union members and supporters gathered inside of the Capitol building in Lansing and were forcibly assaulted and pepper-sprayed by police, with at least 8 arrests. This did not deter Michigan workers who gathered in thousands on Tuesday, December the 11th, to protest the most extreme anti-union law Michigan has ever seen.
I just believe that people have to have their voices heard now, and that people of faith throughout all denominations, all different faiths are as much a part of this movement as workers and unions, that this is not just about union members but about justice, and it's about the fabric of our society. It holds the society together, holds the middle class together, and so there are a lot of people of faith out here trying to show their solidarity.
I am proud to introduce to you Lori Lamoran.
So I'm here today with our fellow pink sign holders and wearers to say, first of all, we stand in solidarity with all of you that care about the middle class, as we do, and secondly, to say that we have to band together for the things and the freedoms that we all agree are important. And so we're here today to support all of you and hope that you will do the same in return, and make sure that the legislature understands that when they mess with our basic rights, they're going to hear about it resoundingly from everybody.
Nurses, teachers, auto workers, service sector employees, iron workers, and others join Occupy allies and the unemployed to stand against the latest assault on workers' rights in the U.S.
Julia Morrissey from the Michigan Nurses Association.
So many nurses in this state already have no protection. If Governor Snyder makes this right to work bill come into play, all nurses will not be protected, and we will not be able to provide safe patient care. We will not be able to protect and advocate. This is why I'm so glad to see so many people here today. Together, we can stand strong. We can do whatever it takes to save Michigan. We must go back into our communities, and we need to continue the hard work that it takes.
Occupy call for activation of the networks they've created and help organize mass action, saying that sustained and escalating resistance must be shown in order to defeat Wall Street's corporate agenda of consolidating wealth in the hands of the few at the expense of the many.
Why are you here today?
I'm here today as a union worker joining my brothers and sisters to protest this rammed through bill that takes away rights of workers, in my opinion, and all of our opinions. The right to work is right to work for less. It's basically designed so that a group of corporate monies were spent to push this legislation through so that they could earn more money. And what it does is they're pushing it as if it's for workers to give them voice and the right to not be part of a union. Well, that's already federally protected. They don't have to be part of a union. However, they do have to pay a service fee before what's going on today in order to cover the costs of their federally protected right to be treated as if they were part of the union. What happens today is it takes that away, and it diminishes the union and the voice of the worker.
It was apparent in Lansing that many workers agreed with them. Mounted police used riot control to keep protesters at bay as the elite's puppet politicians thumbed their noses at the people and passed the law anyway.
But what's great about today is 17,000 trade unionists, community activists, students, business people, religious leaders came to Lansing in the biting cold and said, we're sick and tired, we're not going to take it anymore, we're going to take back our state.
The swelling culture of resistance surged toward Chicago and culminated in the Fight for 15 march and rally held by Workers' Organizing Committee of Chicago on December the 13th and well attended by Occupy union and community allies. WOCC's Fight for 15 campaign demands a higher wage for downtown Chicago's service industry and retail workers.
We're here today to give support to the workers of the retail and restaurant industries in Chicago who are coming together to demand better wages. We marched on Michigan Avenue, otherwise known as the Magnificent Mile. This area is the center, the epicenter of the retail industry here in Chicago. The retail industry here in the downtown area brings in between the restaurant and retail industry, they bring about $4 billion each year. And that represents about 1/3 of all of the income that comes into those industries. So there's a lot of wealth in the downtown area, and there's a lot of wealth generated here, but none of it is coming to or going to the pockets of our workers who are struggling every day.
99ers descended on the Magnificent Mile, calling for a minimum wage increase from $8.25 to $15 per hour. Minimum wage workers can barely provide a subsistence living for themselves and their families as they work hard for corporations whose CEOs earn an average of $4,011 per hour. This income disparity creates economic hardship for thousands of workers who are forced to turn to public or private assistance just to get by.
What are the people who march for this? What are they expecting the end result to be?
That we are able to take care of our basic needs, that we are able to put, we won't have such a struggle putting food on the table, that if we get these good paying jobs, that we hope that our communities can be better, because better paying jobs means like that's more money going into the community, that's more money going into the schools. And then people will feel better about what they work at. I've worked with many people who agree about everything we're doing, who have it, but they don't have the courage sometimes to step out of here. But if they was in a situation where they was getting paid more, they appreciate their job, they will work harder, they'll put more effort into this business. So it's not just something that I look at it as we benefit from, but the people we work for also benefit from.
Stand Up Chicago points out that increasing workers' wages would provide a stimulus effect allowing a better standard of living and leading to growth of local economy. Organizers of the Fight for 15 action emphatically made the point that increase to a living wage would be easily affordable to corporations raking in over $4 billion a year and would directly address the interconnected problems of poverty, crime, and low student achievement, which are inextricably linked to subsistence wages.
In addition to first responders and unions and permaculturists joining the Occupy movement, there's also the Transition Town movement. So there are organizations following the lead of Rob Hopkins with his book who are transitioning to a life with considerably less fossil fuel energy in light of climate change or climate chaos, depending upon what part of the world you're living in or will be living in the near future. So transition is another movement that is marching in lockstep with Occupy in seeking a different path, seeking a path away from this mainstream cultural madness in which we've been embedded for far too long. What we're doing here is transitioning. We're preparing for a world with considerably less fossil fuel energy in light of ongoing climate change. And it works at various scales. There are transition towns at the level of entire cities. My writing spawned the transition movement in Tucson, Arizona, a city of 1 million people. And fundamentally it comes down to those 4 important attributes I've talked about many times, which is securing clean water and healthy food, maintaining body temperature, and developing and maintaining a decent human community. If we focus on those 4 things, it doesn't really matter whether we're focusing at the level of an individual property, a small rural community, or a big city. If we focus on those 4 attributes that have allowed human beings to thrive for the first 2 million years of the human experience, then I think we're moving in the right direction. And there are dozens of steps that can be taken, individual steps that can be taken to move toward securing those 4 attributes by any individual at any time.
Another type of resistance was in evidence on December the 13th over in Los Angeles as Lacan Youth Justice Coalition, occupiers and allies mounted to stop LAPD spying visit to LA's Fusion Center. There are at least 72 Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice Fusion Centers across the U.S. Centers designed to promote information sharing at the federal level between agencies such as the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. military, state, and local level governments. The fusion process is an overarching method of managing the flow of information and intelligence across levels and sectors of government to integrate information for analysis. LA activists eliminated the doublespeak, calling the center what it is, a domestic spying operation. Organizers and allies held a press conference and speak out, followed by a rally and picket to expose the Fusion Center and demand accountability from LAPD. Intel gathering Special Order 1, iWatch, and Trapwire Technology spend vast amounts of taxpayer dollars to target activists and people of color for suspicious activity reports which seldom result in convictions. Even mainstream media has reported that DHS fusion centers are pools of ineptitude and civil liberties intrusions, and local analysts have written inappropriate and potentially illegal reports about constitutionally protected activity. These Big Brother spy operations have so far cost Americans $1.4 billion. LA 99ers came out to say, enough is enough. OWS Week wound up the week in Washington, D.C. at a military veterans panel discussion at which veterans gathered to discuss the employment challenges, homelessness, mental health, and benefit delays affecting them across the country.
It is the person reliving that event in their mind. It's usually a calamitous event or it's a stressor, witnessing an event. It could be one event, it could be 2 events. But what we're doing with today's all-volunteer military force is we're deploying our veterans 2, 3, 4, even 5 times into combat. And these folks are coming back so broken that the laws that are on the books right now that were written during the 40s, 50s, and 60s and improved under the COVA, the Court of Veterans Appeals, those laws are not adequate. They don't cover the situation for a veteran who's been deployed so many times.
It is increasingly apparent that serving Big Brother leads to a string of broken promises rather than security, pride of service, and peace of mind constantly dangled in front of middle and high school kids by military recruiters.
A lot of the troops are waking up and realizing and blaming themselves because they've come to the realization, whether it be before they got sent over there, sometime during their tour of duty, or after they got out, they've gotten the education and the information and they realize, why are we over there? This makes no sense. You mean it was horrible, I had to kill that person, and now I'm finding out that there wasn't really any good reason to do that. Also, if you look at the casualty rates, in World War II, about half the casualties were civilian, and that steadily increased through Korea, through Vietnam, and now well over 90% of the casualties dying in war are civilians. And again, great is the guilt of an unnecessary war, and I think a lot of the troops are placing that guilt on themselves, when again, they should really be pointing the finger at the people sending them over there for absolutely horrid, despicable reasons.